Like, here's your diploma and your dream job.
And step right into it. Welcome. It's kind of like the Price is Right, or the
Exactly.
let's
Like
make
behind door number three.
let's make a deal, right? It's like, do you
Yeah.
want to take the dream job or $100,000? We're like, well, why not
Or
both?
both.
Hey! And then you start working at Starbucks, and then it kind of all falls apart.
Welcome to allgrownup.com. This is Paul Angone, the creator and host of All Grown Up. Today we are interviewing New York Times bestselling author Jon Acuff. Specifically, we're going to be talking about how to prepare for change, why it's a good thing you're not working your dream job right now, the secret to finding and impressing a mentor, and what 25-year-old Jon wishes he would have done differently.
Why do you think transitions are just so rough for some of us, and then maybe why we don't really talk about how hard it is?
Well, I think change in general is, even if it's good change.
Yeah.
I mean, the book talks about there's 4 types of change, because it's not a book about quitting your job. I already wrote that. It's called Quitter, because I'm wicked creative on titles. And it's not about bad do-overs. It's about all do-overs. So I think the challenge is, graduating from college is a do-over.
Yeah.
Like, that's a tremendous do-over. You're changing 3 months of vacation for 8 days. Like, that's a big transition.
That is a huge
And nobody
one.
would say graduating college is a bad thing. Not at all. But it is a huge do-over. So how do you kind of navigate that? But I think a lot of times we don't talk about it because we don't remember the truth. And what I mean by that is, people in their 40s will put pressure on college students and go, what's the plan? What is the next thing you're doing?
Yeah.
As if they had a plan when they were 21. They didn't. They're lying. They didn't know what they were going to do. But they come to a 22-year-old, a 23-year-old, 24-year-old and go, got to get it together. Like, what's your plan? I had a plan when I was your age. No, you didn't. And the thing they're going to do might not even exist yet.
Yeah.
And so I think part of it's our culture. We don't know how to talk about do-over moments.
Yeah.
But they're coming. And whether you're graduating from college, whether you're 52 and going, okay, I want to do a second career, or I'm at a job that I think could be better. Because here's the other thing. 70% of Americans are dissatisfied with work, but 100% of those people aren't meant to be entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
We have this culture right now that celebrates the entrepreneur, and I'm an entrepreneur. I love it.
Yeah.
But not everybody's supposed to start their own business.
Yeah.
So if you're at a company and at a big company and you feel shame of, I've got to start my own business, but if you're not called to do that, then don't do that. Like, you can be amazing at a company and work your way up a ladder there and do great work. You can chase a dream inside of a great company.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it, is we just don't know how to talk about it.
But I love what you're kind of talking about in this book, the career transitions and how you do that. How do you leverage, for somebody that's in that crappy job right now, how do they change their attitude, or maybe it's a mindset thing, but kind of leverage that to say, okay, well, what can I get out of this?
Yeah, completely. And I think you're right. I always tell college students and folks in their early 20s, your first job won't be your dream job.
Yeah.
So let's remove that pressure. Like, if somebody told you that, it's not true. Your first job's job is to teach you how to have a job. That's your first job's job. And so you learn how to work. You go through that kind of season. And I think sometimes we go, I need to have the dream job at 23 or 24. You wouldn't know how to appreciate it.
Yeah.
Like, you don't even have a precedent, And so I think that's part of it. But I think in those moments, what I like to work on and encourage people is what the heart of do-over is about, which is what I call a career savings account. And a career savings account is built off of 4 things: relationships plus skills plus character times hustle. And the problem is, most of us are taught to get ready for college, spend 18 years getting ready for college, and then the next thing we get ready for is death and retirement.
Yeah.
And there's this 40-year gap where we just kind of work. We don't think that a job should matter at all. We go to TGI Fridays, not TGI Mondays, because we think a job is just a job. But what I'd encourage somebody that's in their mid-20s, if they're at a job they don't like, is to really start to go, how do I get better at relationships? How do I develop some skills here? When somebody tells me they want to quit their job, I always say there's 2 questions to ask. What do you need to learn first, and what do you need to earn first? What do you need to learn is, even at a bad job, you can learn valuable things that you'll take with you to the next job. So if you're at a job right now and you go, okay, it's not my favorite job, it's not my dream job, but the things I learn here can help me at my next job. So what do I need to learn? When I was at a job that I didn't like, I signed up for every possible leadership program. I signed up for anything I could, continuing education, anything they offered, because I just wanted to get better. I wanted to build that skill. And then you need to hustle. And a big thing I always talk about is you need to choose your attitude and adjust your expectations. So not change your attitude. That takes a year. That's exhausting. It involves candles. I'm talking about this morning when I go to work, I need to choose my attitude. Sometimes people say to me, who is my boss to tell me what to do, or they move my lunch hour, or, who are they to say that? And I always think, well, actually, they're 100% of the people that get to say that because they pay 100% of your check. And that doesn't mean you should ever work for somebody who's abusive, but you have to understand the dynamic of, I'm here to do hard work for this person who's paying me to do hard work.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we forget, when we're at school, we are paying to go to school. We're paying these people to teach us and give us good grades. And when you go to work, they're paying you, and they kind of expect something out of it, right?
It's the reverse.
Which I don't think we realize. And we're kind of waiting for that syllabus to show up on our desks to say, here's the ground rules for how you get an A. And that doesn't exist. They want they want you to write your own. And then, on the flip side, you have the crappy job. I think for a lot of us, we have that at first. And then maybe we move up to the next level or whatever, and then it kind of switches. And you talk about this to the kind of the comfort zone, right? Where it's you don't have the angst, you don't have the frustration, as like I want to get out of here. Now it's more like this isn't that bad, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like I can go to lunch, and I got the workout room is like really close to my office.
I know how to do it. I know how to do the 5 things I have to do.
Like I could be here for the next 25 years. And so I love this line that you have in your book. The distance between comfortable and comatose is surprisingly short.
Yeah, and I think the challenge is, I talk to people sometimes about this, that the most dangerous job of all is the good enough job.
Yeah.
Because see, when you have a horrible job, it forces you to do something. It forces you into action where you go, I got to do something different. I got to figure this out. When you have a good enough job, it woos you to sleep and says, like you said, I got it figured out. It's enough. Like, I'll do something different someday. And you enter into this kind of cocoon. And I have a friend that's in the first chapter of Do-Over, that my friend Nate that I talked about. And he, went through a huge job transition. And it's like being in a bubble. And he got out. He'd been there 8 years and said, I don't even know how to do LinkedIn. Like, all I knew how to do was that bubble. And now that I'm out of the bubble, what do I do? And so I think you constantly have to be going, okay, again, what are some new skills I need to learn? How do I stay relevant to my industry? How do I not just get stuck in something that's comfortable? Because you're going to go through job change. Like, you won't die at the job you have right now. Like, you won't. You're not going to, like, the gold watch is done. You're not going to be there 40 years and get a gold watch at the end. Those days don't exist anymore. And so how do you prepare for that transition?
Yeah. This is a bigger question, but do you think kind of just the rules have completely changed as far as how you have career success? I mean, I know there's probably some elements that are saying, but how do you see those on the bigger level as saying, like, you can't do it like maybe our parents did?
Yeah, I think a lot of the rules have changed, and I think a lot of the core values haven't. So I think that there's a freelance culture in a way that there used to not be, where the idea of having 5 or 6 side hustle things you're doing on the side as you kind of piece together a career. I think that's a lot more common than it used to be.
Yeah.
Just because you're able to do it. Even stuff like working from home has changed the shape of career. 45% of millennials care more about workplace flexibility than they do salary.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll see boomer companies try to fix millennial problems with boomer solutions, and they just miss each other.
Yeah.
And they say, I want to work from home. They go, how about more money? And they go, I want to work from home. And they miss each other. So I think that's really changed. I think the ability to work from home is changing whole communities. I remember I was on a ski lift in Crested Butte, Colorado, and Crested Butte is one of those places where you have to want to go there. It's not a pass-through place. It's in the middle of nowhere.
Or you're
it's hard to get to.
Crusted butt. If
exactly, which is tempting, which is a very tempting phrase.
It's a low-hanging fruit joke.
That was low-hanging. That was a softball, really. And so this lady there was a kindergarten teacher, and she said it was for the first time she had 5 new students in her class because people didn't have to work at an office anymore and people were moving to that community. So you're seeing beach towns and mountain towns where it used to be you'd go, oh, I'd love to live here, but there's no jobs.
Yeah.
And now because the job can be anywhere. So yeah, we're in the middle of a huge shift right now, and the value that people put on things is changing.
Yeah, and I think your book touches on a lot of this. What's great about this is I think millennials especially, they're asking the hard questions now because they don't want to end up in that job that they're going to hate at 50 and think, well, what am I doing with my life? So they're asking these tough questions now.
Well, a lot of them have seen their parents end up there, and they think, okay, I saw that. And Paul, how old are you?
I am 30. I had to think about it for a second, but that's when you're getting a little bit. I'm 31. Yeah.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I'm an
So
old
you're
millennial, older
yeah.
millennial.
Yeah, so I'm Gen X, and so even between the two of us,
Yeah,
like there's differences, so
yeah,
it's really fascinating.
yeah, yeah. I like and kind of this idea of what you said before. We think it's going to be simple. We think we're going to step into our dream job. The angels are going to be singing and the lights are going to shine down. It's
You'll get it with your diploma. They'll be
yeah,
like, "Here's your diploma
ex
and your dream job."
and step right into it. Welcome. It's kind of like the Price is Right, or the
Exactly,
let's
like
make a
behind door number
let's
3.
make a deal, right? It's like, do you
Yeah,
want to take the dream job or $100,000? We're like, well, why not
or
both?
both. Yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
and then you start working at Starbucks, and then it kind of all falls apart. But you talk about this idea of brokenness. That there is a lot of we gain a lot. So in that transition, kind of that period of I don't know what to do next. There's the failure. There's the brokenness. What do you think? What do you think we get out of that? Why do you think that's such an important part of the process as you're trying to figure out what's next?
Well, I think when you go through what I call a bump, for instance, which is a negative, unexpected experience, you really lean on relationships and you learn to, connect in community. That's the thing that you need in a moment like that. Because two things happen in a bump. You either break out or you break down. And the difference is usually the relationships you have. And so I think even in a moment like that, it's a chance to really lean into your relationships and really connect with people. You also gain empathy.
Yeah.
You gain, it's really easy when you're, say you're a sophomore in college to think everybody just has a job and that's just how it goes. And then if you get bumped around a little bit right after college, you start to develop this empathy for what it takes to have a job and what it takes to help other people who might not have a job.
Yeah.
And so I think like one of the big gifts of a season like that can be that idea of empathy. And the ability to see other people and what they're going through.
Yeah. And I love how you tie in relationships in your book, because I think as a culture, especially millennials, I mean, we spend, the research will say that we spend more time in isolation than any other age group. We're maybe globally connected, but we're not like actually hanging out with anybody face to face. So I love this idea that I wrote down this quote that a friend is someone you spend the day with, but an advocate is someone you shape your career with. So I even love that distinction of, you can, and how do you even, as you describe that, getting those advocates in your life, why do you think they're so important?
Well, there's a couple reasons, and we put together this tool called the careersavingsaccount.com. It's 12 questions, it's a quiz, and they're crazy questions, but it's a lot of fun, and 3,000 people took it, and 63% of them didn't have an advocate. And by that I mean somebody who's further down the road that can tell them which things to watch out for.
Yeah.
And that's why you need an advocate. Andre 3000 in Outcast talks about that, where he says, mentors, they have the cheat codes. Like imagine in a video game culture that if you had played if you had played Call of Duty for 10 years and I'd never played, I would start the game and not know how to do anything. And you would be able to say, oh, here's the 7 things you need to do because you've done it before. And so an advocate is someone who's ahead of you. And sometimes it's hard to find those people. Like I never want to talk about advocates in the sense of like they grow on trees magically and they're just wise people waiting to help you. It's never that simple. It takes time. But even finding somebody you respect and asking them, what's a book you think I should read? Like, what should I do? Because sometimes we go, okay, I got to get a mentor. And we go up to a stranger and go, will you mentor me? And that's like asking a stranger to marry you.
Exactly.
Like, I've never met you. That's a personal, intimate thing. Like, no. And so I'd much rather say, find somebody you respect, somebody that career-wise, there's 3 ways to look for it. Look for it in industry. If you're a dentist, you should be connected to a dentist who's 10 years ahead of you. Look for it in life. Marriage for me, marriage is challenging to everybody. So it's important for me to know people that have the kind of marriage I want that are 10 years down the road. And then look for somebody that has kind of you expertise. Somebody that knows you well enough to know like, hey, that thing you just did was ego. Or that thing you just did was fear. I did this blog post once on stuff Christians like, and it ended with me saying, who's going to be the next Donald Miller? And my friend called me and said, you wrote that way because you wanted people to say you. You wanted people to tell you were going to be. And at first I was like, no, you're wrong. Like when somebody gives you hard advice, I don't want to pretend I'm this guy. It's like, oh, thank you for that wisdom. That was like eating kale. But he was right. And so I think we need people that can do that, but we need to approach it in the right way. So again, like a single question of, hey, what's one book you'd suggest I read? And then read the book and then tell them later you did, because what happens is people come up and you go, hey, I want you to mentor me. And if somebody says, well, why don't you read this book instead? And you go, nah, forget it.
Yeah.
They're never going to help you because you were lazy right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Like if you actually sit down and read the book and write an email back and say, here's the three things I learned. Like, can I ask you one more question?
Yeah.
You can start a relationship. And that says to them, you're all in.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to do it because the person you respect is going to be busy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're kind of showing them two things. You're showing them humility and you're showing them grit.
Yep.
Which I think are two really important things that a lot of us are. It's hard. It's not easy to be humble. I mean,
No.
you're like one of the most. You excel at humility probably better than anybody I know. I'm sure you can agree to that, right? That humility is just the.
I thought you were going to say I'm the most humble. I can't I am one of the most humble people I know, which is a funny.
I was trying to feed you that joke, but it didn't work.
Yeah.
But no, it's so true. And if somebody sees that you care, if somebody sees that you're willing to go that, okay, they're going to take my advice and they're going to run with it, then they only want to keep helping you out. They want to see you succeed.
It creates a relationship, and it's fun to help people, and that gives that other person a chance to be generous and say, hey, here's this idea, I think you should watch out for this. So yeah, I think that's such a key, and I just didn't know that going in. When I was 25, I didn't put a value on that. If I could go back and tell my 25-year-old self, that's what I would say.
Yeah, if you had to, you might already touched on this, but what are some of you talk about this in your book, but some of the biggest mistakes 25-year-old Jon was making?
Oh, just being a jerk, like arrogance, just rampant. And that's not like, I didn't finish that at 25. There's moments in my 30s I look back on and go,
Sure.
oh man, I really approached that the wrong way. Thinking I knew more than I knew, being impatient, not seeing the long-term value of the places I was at. I mean, I got to write advertising and marketing for the Home Depot.
Yeah.
Like that was an amazing experience, and I don't know that I appreciated it at the time. I mean, sometimes people go, well, how'd you learn to tweet? Like, where'd you learn to tweet? And I learned it by writing headlines for Home Depot, because I'd come in and they'd say, hey, we need X amount, we need 10 headlines for a Granite ad for the New York Times by noon, go.
Yeah.
And I learned this fire hose method of creativity, and that was a tremendous learning opportunity for me. And I'm sure I had a bad attitude during it. So I wish I could go back and say, hey, this thing you think doesn't matter matters.
Yeah.
And the way you're going to use it doesn't even exist yet. Like Twitter didn't even exist then. That's why when people tell me their 5-year plan, I'm like, oh, that's great. Your 5-year plan, that's hilarious.
Yeah, but you're so right. I mean, you're elongating the view, and you talk about this idea of the career savings account and compound interest. I mean, that's what it really is. I mean, you're putting these little pieces in there so it can grow exponentially, and you can't see it right now. You don't know how big that's going to grow in 10 years or how important that piece is going to be, but you're
the relationships.
Yeah.
Like the relationships you throw out. I mean, I talk about boomerang relationships where it's not that they end, they just go off in another direction and they're going to come back.
Yeah.
And so how do you have lots of casual relationships where you're going to get career opportunities from somebody that you haven't talked to in 3 years, that you worked with and had a good relationship with, and they come back and say, hey, I'm at this company in Portland, and I know we haven't talked in a few years, but like you really came up in my mind. I was thinking this might be a good position for you, and that boomerang comes back. And you're right, at the moment you didn't know.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, I think it just having the big hopes and the big dreams is not the problem. It's just the timeline of when you might step into some of those, right? It's not
when we want it faster.
Yeah.
It's disappointing, I think, sometimes. And I was thinking about this today. Part of the reason we expect things to be fast is that authors and speakers and internet people talk about the end, but not the middle.
Yeah.
So like we post these things of like our successes, and then it really gets sketchy when somebody is trying to sell you their path to success. And so they only show you the shiny parts and go, it can come from a good place of like, I want to inspire people. So here's the end product.
Yeah.
But it can also create this sense of like it's all end product. And so sometimes I try to post photos from my hotel when I go speak somewhere of like, this is a really depressing hotel photo in a town you wouldn't want to visit. And this is real life. Like it's not all like, we always take the photo overlooking the beach and it's like, this is the office today. And there's nothing wrong with those. But a friend of mine challenged me on that. He said, Jon, you post a lot of photos of kind of the hustle alarm clock early in the morning. You don't post any photos of the nap in the afternoon.
Sure.
And he was right. Like I was manicuring this one way to look at what I do. And so I think that's part of the challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pulling the authenticity piece of, this is saying who I am, the good and the bad, and not letting the kind of the obsessive comparison disorder take over of trying to constantly compare ourselves with the swirling everything that is around us, our friends and everything.
I've never heard it called that. That's a great way to look at it.
It's because I made it up myself, so you can.
That's great.
The new OCD.
OCD. That's great.
The new OCD, the smallpox of our generation. I really
Did you put that in your new book?
It was in my first book, 101 Secrets of Your 20s.
Nice.
Yeah, so
it's solid.
I started realizing that for myself, and it doesn't ever change. I know you talk about this too. We kind of think like, well, once I get this, it'll be different. Once I get the dream job, once I get the book deal, once I get that speaking gig, right? But you realize you just start comparing yourself in different ways, in different marks where you're saying, well, I suck now because of this.
Yeah, there's not a number of Twitter followers that'll be enough. There's not a number of blog readers or books sold. Yeah, and if you get on that cycle, it just ends up in a bad place.
Yeah. Just to wrap this up with one final question, I love asking people what would they describe as their signature sauce. So like, what is the Jon signature sauce that you think you kind of bring that other people don't? Like, what's your unique flavor that you bring to the world? Because that's, I think we're all tailor-made. I think we're all, highly crafted. And it's a hard question because it's not like there's not a one be-all answer. But
sure,
as you're thinking about
I think that's a fantastic question. That's an awesome wrap-up question. For me, I would say there's kind of three things that I think combine to make my secret sauce. One is humor. Yeah. There's a lot of boring career books. There's a lot of boring business books. And I love to laugh. I had the benefit of growing up in a family that valued laughter, and humor was a currency in our home. And so I think humor is one of them. I think the second is I kind of have an every person approach, an every man, every woman kind of approach, in the sense of the things I'm talking about apply to just about everybody. I'm not saying, okay, to do what I do, you have to quit your job tomorrow, become an entrepreneur, and become an internet person. And like, that's not the way I approach things. There's a lot of great books that have kind of this very narrow, to do this book, you have to be exactly like this. And I'm much more of an everyman kind of person. The last one is I try to be honest. If I've learned something through a mistake, I'll share the mistake. I think old school leadership said, if I share my weaknesses, people won't trust my strengths. And new school says, if I pretend I don't have weaknesses, people won't trust my strengths. Yeah. And I think the millennials can see that a mile away. And so I try to have those three things present so that people read my book. I mean, that was one of my favorite parts of this process. Was Jim Gaffigan, one of my favorite comedians, endorsed it. Yeah. And that was awesome, to have somebody who I love and respect as a comedian say, this is a funny book. Yeah. And so I think that's a big part of it, is having fun with it. Like, how dare we write boring books challenging people to have exciting lives? That doesn't make any sense.
That is a really good way to put it. That is good. Well, I don't think we can get more profound than that. So I'm going to let you go, Jon, but thank you for the great book.
Awesome.
I know tons of people are going to check it out, and they're going to have their life changed by it. So.
Well, thanks, man. This is fun to be on.